Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started because we want to make sure that we leave maximum amount of time for our conversation today. Good afternoon and welcome to our roundtable, a conversation with pioneering HBC music educators. We are delighted to be joined today by Professor Ed Ellis of Allen University, noted choral director and arranger, Dr. Roland Carter, director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, Dr. Paul Kwame, and director of the Morehouse Glee Club, Dr. David Morrow. We are grateful for the support to make this panel happen, and we receive support from the SEM Gertrude Robinson Network, the African and African Diasporic Music Section, the SEM Board, and the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. The Robert W. Woodruff Library was also our co-sponsor in our pre-conference yesterday, celebrating HBCU's musical legacies. And we'll hear more from them in a moment. But first, a note about HBCUs. Historically, Black colleges and universities are institutions that go back to the founding of freedom for African Americans in the 19th century. This constellation of over 100 universities, mostly located in the Southern United States, was founded by Black communities, Black religious organizations, and also white religious organizations, philanthropic organizations, and state governments. Their musical programs emerged soonly thereafter and include the founding of the Fisk Jubilee Singers in 1871 and marching band traditions that also go back to the 1890s and include composer and band leader W.C. Handy teaching at Alabama A&M University. Throughout the 19th century, HBCU music programs were critical sites, throughout the 19th and early 20th century, HBCU music programs were critical sites for Black composers to teach, compose, research, and write in various traditions, including Black musical traditions. In the 21st century, these programs are still vital and vibrant programs that serve as repositories of deep knowledge, lineage, and innovation. We are excited to learn more from our esteemed panelists who have dedicated their lives and their brilliance to this continuing rich heritage. The opening of this roundtable will closely follow how one would likely open a program at an HBCU. So next, we will hear from my esteemed colleague and co-pilot in all things HBCUs, Dr. Loneka Battiste, followed by comments from Library Director of the AUC Robert W. Woodruff Library, Professor Dr. Loretta Parham, and then Roland Carter's arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Battiste.
Good afternoon. I am Loneka Wilkinson Battiste, Assistant Professor of Music Education at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and an alumna of Dillard University of New Orleans, an HBCU. Historically, Black colleges and universities are hubs of musical ingenuity with strong reputations, robust histories, and distinct traditions that reflect the history and culture of the innumerable musicians who have passed through their gates. Yesterday, we had a full day of panels and discussion centered on the HBCU experience. The spirit was high, the engagement deep and meaningful, and the impact, we hope, will be lasting. Today, we continue with that same energy as we hear from iconic HBCU ensemble directors. The contributions of these musical leaders continue the legacy of promoting institutional unity and pride and undergirding the financial health of their institutions, following the model originally established by the Fisk Jubilee Singers in 1871. Those who are familiar with HBCU music programs easily recognize the names Eddie Ellis, David Morrow, Paul Kwame, and Roland Carter. We are honored that these music legends would share their time, knowledge, and perspectives with us. As Fredara stated, the next voice you will hear is that of Dr. Loretta Parham, Library Director for the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. Following Dr. Parham, we will begin the panel in true HBCU fashion with the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Thank you, Dr. Battiste. Can everyone hear me? Good. I had that momentary challenge with audio, so you know that always happens. So It's good to be heard, certainly in this audience with all of these talented musicians. So my name is Loretta Parham, and I am CEO and Director of the Atlanta University Center Woodruff Library. And I'm pleased to bring greetings to you for today's special roundtable. The AU Center Woodruff Library is really proud, and we represent and serve several institutions here at the center, namely Clark Atlanta University, Spelman College, Morehouse College, and the Interdenominational Theological Center. As a library supporting this consortium of historically Black colleges and universities, we're really pleased to partner with the Society of Ethnomusicology on yesterday's pre-conference symposium, which I understand, in a word, was outstanding. So congratulations to you for that. It was a full day of wonderful panels, student engagement, and even musical performances. And though we had hoped here at the library to host you in person in our beautiful library on the campus of the Atlanta University Center, we appreciate greatly the opportunity to showcase some of our archival treasures related to music collections, even in this virtual format. So I want to thank you for allowing us to partner with you this year. Special appreciation, of course, to the staff of the AU Center Woodruff Library, and to Dr. Hahn, president of the Society of Ethnomusicology, and his hardworking team. I know what it takes to put on one of these events. And to the co-chairs of this roundtable, Drs. Hadley and Dr. Battiste, thank you for the lineup of really great stellar panelists that you contributed to for today's discussion. As well, we want to salute all the discussants and especially our very own Dr. David Morrow from Morehouse College and director of the Morehouse Glee Club. And on a personal note, my choral director during my time in the Wendell Whalum Community Choir. I was also library director at Hampton University before coming to the Atlanta University Center during the time and tenure of music and choir director, the late Roselle Dillard. And while I don't know Dr. Roland Carter personally or professionally, I do recognize and I have sung and listened to selections that were enriched by his outstanding gift of arrangement and composition. So thank you for that. Finally, I have to say, I don't know Professor Kwami, but it's ironic that just 2 days ago, I picked up an issue of Southern Living magazine. And in Southern Living magazine, there is a photo of the current Fisk Jubilee singer group and Dr. Kwame featured in this magazine, giving, applause to the musical excellence which is provided through his gift as well. So thank you for that for sure. This particular roundtable and the pre-conference proceedings will be available for public viewing on the Atlanta University Center's Library's Institutional Repository Radar, RADAR, very soon, where you will also be able to find other notable digital collections of interest to scholars and studiers in the humanities. So thank you again for allowing us to partner. Thank you for all that you do in making these days and this life of ours during this demanding, uplifting through the gift of sound, the gift of note, the gift of music. Please enjoy the conference and thank you so much.
that's how you have to start a program like this. And we're excited to hear more from Dr. Carter in just a little bit. We're going to have a conversation in kind of two sections. First, I get to dialogue with Professor Ellis about the HBCU marching band tradition, and then we will segue in talking with Drs. Morrow, Kwame, and Carter about the rich HBCU choral tradition as well. Can everybody hear me okay? It's great, okay. And so we would like to start I'm going to start by introducing Professor Ellis, and then we're going to show a video of the Allen University Marching Band to transition into our conversation. Professor Eddie Ellis was born in Atlanta, Georgia, where he received his primary and secondary education. He taught in the Georgia public school system for 18 years, Randolph County and DeKalb County, and his high school bands consistently received superior and excellent awards in marching band, concert band, and jazz band. After teaching in the public school system, he served as director of bands for 7 years at his alma mater, Morris Brown College, where the band grew in number of students as well as the quality of all performing ensembles, including the marching band, symphonic band, and jazz band. The symphonic band toured the state of Georgia and Alabama. While doing so, the Morris Brown College Symphonic Band was the first African-American college band to perform for the Georgia Music Educators Association. This performance took place January 26, 2000 in Savannah, Georgia. The marching band performed for the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as several halftime performances for the Atlanta Falcons. The marching band was invited to apply for the Macy's Parade. And in addition, the marching band was featured in the hit movie Drumline, recording artist Outkast video for the song Rosa Parks. And some of you remember the video by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys and Bone Crusher. Indeed, Professor Ellis has raised the level of student participation and the quality of instruction at the secondary and collegiate levels at all of the institutions under his supervision, including his current home of Allen University. We are excited to welcome Professor Ellis to join us in this conversation today. Right before you hear him speak, we'll give you a little snippet of how they get down at Allen University.
And let's show them how we do it in Columbia, South Carolina. In case you didn't know, this is a band that leaves everything off the field.
Thank you, and join me in welcoming Professor Ellis. Professor Ellis.
Yes, thank you so much. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start out with a question for you. HBCU marching bands are among one of the most visible music traditions of HBCUs. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, and then reading about Morris Brown's marching band, you know, I mentioned the appearances in various parades, football games, and music videos even. I wanted you to talk a little bit about the richness of HBCU marching band traditions and why you think they're so meaningful to so many people.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure being here. to be among so many great musicians and teachers. I want to first say, the band that you saw, Allen University, Allen has not had a band program since 1968. And I had literally retired, and we were brought back to resurrect the band program while increasing student enrollment. And I say that in terms of the relevancy of band programs and music programs, because one of the main things is we serve as a brand ambassador. And I think all music programs are probably the best marketing tool that HBCUs or any college can have. We can afford to go out and perform, but the biology teachers and math teachers, they can't do that. So the growth of our band is still growing. And I think, again, I don't want to sound redundant, but thank you for allowing me to come on to do this. HBCU marching bands goes back all the way to prior to 1946. Now, I think Tuskegee was the first, and then Dr. William Foster FAMU came in, and from his input, his band pageantry, a lot of things derived from that in terms of where we have evolved to today. We've gone from, back in the day, 100-piece band was considered large to 200- and 300-piece band on HBCU. So they are very relevant, and they play a significant role in marketing and bringing new students, quality students, to any HBCU, PWI too, but any HBCU based on the history and the relevancy of band programs.
Thank you. You already outlined so many threads to follow up on. And since you mentioned Dr. William P. Foster, and I'm an alumna of Florida A&M University, I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about what he did that really shifted HBCU band culture so significantly.
Well, personally, let me say this about Dr. Foster first, and that is, as a high school band director, we did the Florida A&M parade. I was the band director at Walker High School then. And throughout the parade, once you get to the viewing stand, I had an opportunity to shake Dr. Foster's hand. And when I shook his hand, he said, "Welcome to Tallahassee, Mr. Ellis." And I said, "Duh, he knows my name." So, so I had a chance to, that was my first meeting with Dr. Foster. And it was a grand occasion. Now, what he's done for marching band or band program, the Florida A&M program started by him. It's not only the marching band is most popular, but the Florida A&M music department, they have a comprehensive music program and a comprehensive band program, not only the marching band, but they have an outstanding jazz band. They have an outstanding symphonic and wind ensemble, and that's what's needed in all HBCU. Yes, it's the marching band that brings the fan. Yes, it's the marching band that's on TV all the time. But if we're gonna educate young people in terms of music, all HBCUs need a comprehensive music and band program as started by Dr. Foster. He has meant so much to the evolution of bands and band program, and he will never, ever be forgotten.
Thank you. You, in your work too, you've had marching bands, always had marching bands, symphonic bands, and jazz bands. Can you talk more about how all of those different ensembles are connected and function at HBCUs? I think people first and foremost think, as you mentioned, think primarily about the marching bands for specific reasons, but talk about the importance of those symphonic and jazz bands as well.
Okay, if you're gonna have a music education program where you train teachers, then they should be well versed not only in marching band, but they should be versed in the symphonic band and its literature, as well as jazz band and their literature. There seems to be a trend nowadays where you do marching band year round, and in my opinion, I'm just one humble soul, but that's not acceptable. You need to incorporate all gamuts of music and music education, especially if you're training young people to go out and teach. So that's my tie-in with it.
Thank you. I hear you when you're talking about the well-roundedness of the students that you teach, and you mentioned preparing students to be teachers. And I'm from the state of Florida, and I'm struck by how these HBCU programs, in particular HBCU music programs, are the pipeline of so many high school band directors and choir directors. That was certainly true in my home state of Florida. And I know you too have experience of teaching both high school and collegiate bands. Can you help us understand, again, the importance of these programs and providing public schools with teachers and band directors and choir directors and jazz band directors?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. As a high school band director, I want to go back to those days. I worked in the DeKalb County schools, and when they first started integration, they came up with a deal where they would house all of the schools based on the population in the county. At that particular time in 1980, it was 70% white, 30% African American. So all of the faculties were aligned with that percentage in mind. Now, what makes it relevant as it relates to HBCUs and education? I made a pact in addition to that, there was a program called M2M. That meant if you came from a school where you were in the majority, you could attend a school in the northern end of the county where you were a minority. Now, I couldn't stop that. That was nothing that I could do. But what I did say to myself, I don't want my band students going up there because of something that I didn't teach or something that they considered would be better in the north end of the county than what I was providing there. So that was that was my philosophical basis of teaching and making sure that my students did the same thing that was done in the northern end of the county. If they went to a band festival, we were there. If they took the jazz band, we were there. If they symphonic band, marching band, all of that stuff. So in order to participate like that and have the philosophy that I think needs to be had, needs to be still current, is we must train them in all facets. Again, I'm going back to what I stated previously, in a comprehensive band, choir, or any music program. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does answer the question, because in your answer, you're pointing to how HBCUs and thinking about the careers of their music graduates right. There are policy things that happen in K-12 education that influence that. I went to a different school because of MTM programs in my county where I grew up, and the role that competitions play in high school marching bands as well, and as a direct correlation to what's happening on the HBCU and the collegiate level, and what you're thinking about to make sure that your students, your graduates, are able to navigate that landscape. And I think, and this came up yesterday, in thinking about HBCU music programs, there can be this seamlessness between what happens on the high school level and what's happening on the collegiate level as well. So thank you for explaining that. You mentioned the jazz band as well, and I'd like to hear your thoughts as well on the richness and the importance of jazz band traditions at historically Black colleges.
Well, as you know, back in the day, maybe before I was born or during my earlier years, and some of the panelists can relate to this, jazz was called devil's music. You know, it wasn't looked upon as being good and great. So it was primarily African American. And now it evolved into now we don't even really do jazz like that anymore. There are some schools who still putting up good jazz bands, making good jazz a part of their curriculum. But then there are a lot of us that don't, and it's up to us to make sure that we maintain, again, jazz in the music program. I love marching band. That basically what pays the salary. But I just can't allow marching band to be the impetus for my music program, for my band program. And jazz plays an important role. Coming from Atlanta, I consider myself one of the luckiest individuals in the world because of my upbringing. I was lucky enough to have, if there's anyone on here from Atlanta, my first band director, his name was Mr. Paul Mitchell. And Paul Mitchell he's deceased now. He played at a jazz spot called Down the Hatch. He put the trombone in my hand. Then my high school band director graduated from Clark, Atlanta University, Dr. Alfred Wyatt. He also participated in jazz. And then there was another gentleman in the Atlanta area who's deceased, Mr. Bill Brainer, who was also a jazz band. So I had a good jazz upbringing. And when I was drafted in the Army, I participated in the Army band. Again, a portion of the Army band was jazz. So I love jazz. I love the jazz band. I love the jazz idiom. I love it all. And again, I got to go back to it, but we've got to do what we can to make sure that our students, Black or white, is trained or have the experience in all genres of instrumental music.
Thank you for that. And again, it's just this sort of what I'm coming to really think about, a cyclical influence that happens between, students going to these HBCUs and then going out and becoming band directors and running music programs at the high school level. And then those students cycling through these institutions, the legacy and the influence between the K-12 system and these programs, it seems to be so rich, so very rich.
Right, exactly right. And one of the things you mentioned, Morris Brown participating in the movie Drumline. Mm-hmm. Now, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that movie did more for HBCU marching bands than anything that I can think of in terms of recognition. At one time, I just don't think they respected our bands. People respected our bands like they should have been respected. The Florida Hymns and the Gremlins, they were, but there were other colleges and universities too. And because of that movie Drumline, now, today, I believe, again, this is just me, you have more African-American band directors and PWIs than you've ever had before. Now, we've always had outstanding African-American people teaching at PWIs, but now you've got some African-Americans teaching in marching band and music programs throughout the country. And I believe that Drumline had a lot to do with that. And I'm gonna go even further. The Saturday game day experience, they want the fans to enjoy that game day experience. And whatever they can do to make sure that that's a possibility, then they're gonna do that. So the movie Drumline, if you just go back and just think about commercials now, that you see drumming. You never saw that before. Beyonce, she did her record that she just put out last summer was based on what? HBCU marching bands and its culture. So that Drumline did a lot for HBCUs.
So you mentioned these really high profile moments. I remember going to see Drumline in the theater. I remember obviously when Beyonce's Homecoming happened a couple of years ago. Both projects shined a bright light on these traditions that have been around for decades at this point. The Marching 100 is 75 years old at this point.
Right.
And so when you mention the word respect, so do you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to hear you talk a little bit more about that word respect. People did not respect this tradition. You as a practitioner, how did that look in terms of what you were trying to build and what you were trying to create? What do you mean when you say respect? They did not respect the tradition.
What I meant by respect was, again, let's go back to high school bands, and I articulated the fact that we participated in band competitions. And sometimes we were judged before we played a note, before we made a step, simply because we were African American, and some people have seen our band. So that's what I meant. There were a lot of people that did not respect what we did as a band unit because, number one, some of the things and the styles changed. From all of it is still military based, but the traditional marching style, the high knee lift, that was back in the day, but we still do it. Whereas some schools, they've transferred that to what we call core style. So if you didn't do the core style thing, they did not respect what we were actually doing. They're saying our stuff was outdated. Our stuff was, they don't use that anymore. But I challenge anybody to go to a HBCU football game and just look at our outdated stuff and see how the people enjoy it. And that's what we're there for to do, is to entertain the people, the audience. And so that's what I mean by they did not respect our units based on predetermined ideas that it was going to be bad. So you got to, again, at the competition, you got to come, before you play the note, you've got to come from, on a scale of 1 to 10, you got to come from 1 and then go all the way up. Whereas some bands, they start them at a 10 and they may go down to an 8. So that's what I meant by respect.
And you think moments like Drumline, moments like Beyonce's Homecoming were pivotal in sort of shifting that narrative about not only, it sounds like not only HBCU marching bands, but also high school bands, where they're the ones having to go and compete for these ratings as well.
Yes, ma'am. I really do.
I wanted to turn to Alan for a moment, because you mentioned in your opening remarks that you were lured and brought out of retirement to come to Allen University to reignite their band or their music program in general.
Well, they've had a music program. It continued even when they dropped the marching band program in 1968. The music programs continued, and they continued well. But it was primarily the music department and its choirs that came up. So I was literally at home on the sofa watching The View at my phone room. I had just left South Carolina State University, and one of my friends, who was his former band director, and asked would I be interested in coming to Allen to start a program. And I was tired of sleeping on the sofa, and I said, yes, I'll be glad to do it. And this is the 4th year now. So we've gone, that the band that you saw, I believe may have been our 1st year. And that was about 50 students. And now we have about 80 students. And this Saturday is our homecoming. And hopefully we will have 17 bands. And that's right, 1,001 student, high school student, will be performing with the Allen University Band on the field Saturday. And hopefully we can get maybe 100 of those students to come to Allen to get an education.
bringing it full circle to your earlier point about how significant these ensembles are in marketing and in recruiting the university. And it's your homecoming week. And so I'm extra grateful that you made time for us during Alan's homecoming week. I know how frenzied and busy that time period is, particularly for band directors. So we're so grateful that you spent a few moments with us to talk with us today. I guess I'll and we're going to transition in a few moments, but I wanted to ask this last question of you, and we will have time for Q&A with all of our panelists at the end of our roundtable. So if you got questions, drop them in the chat and we'll just kind of come back to them. Sitting here in 2021, where do you see these marching band traditions going? Because I'm thinking about Allen, and I've seen some other schools decide to restart or to start band programs at other HBCUs. How do you see the landscape as a long participant in this tradition? How do you see the landscape, not just for HBCU marching bands, but for instrumental music at historically Black colleges at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I see positive growth based on 2021. But the main thing, I don't want to evade your question, but we have to go back to high school. And the band program and the music program, the string program, the chorus program, they have to be offered in the high schools so that we can have some place to get students from. PWIs, whatever, we've got to go. We need the high schools to make sure that our programs at HBCUs continue to flourish. Right now, it's sort of dwindling a little bit, you know, with all the graduation tests, and they take the kids out of music because they think it's a frill, and well, you can come back after school and practice. Well, you got to train the students, you know, and they're putting beginners in classes with students who maybe sung for a year, for 2 or 3 years, or instrumentalists who played for 2 or 3 years. So it is, in my opinion, it's got to start at the high school so that we can continue to be relevant and we can have a pool to pick from. That's the larger schools. They're still doing great because they're famous. They know those names. They know FAMU. They know Southern, and they know Bama State, but they don't know Allen. So I need a good pool of students to pull from so that we can kind of rise up in quality and size to those universities I met. So that's why I see it. Without those high schools, we're going to stay stagnant, I believe.
You didn't evade the question at all. What I hear you saying is when we advocate for accessibility to music education and K-12, that is advocating for the vitality and the ongoing vibrance of HBCU music programs as well. That's what I heard.
Thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking Professor Ellis for joining us during Allen's homecoming week to talk with us. And I will now hand it over to Dr. Battiste.
Good afternoon. In this part of the roundtable, we will have discussion with 3 iconic HBCU choral music educators, Dr. Roland Carter, Dr. Paul Kwame, and Dr. David Morrow. Time does not permit giving their full bios, but I will speak a bit about their backgrounds. Dr. Carter is Professor Emeritus of American Music at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. He served UTC for 24 years and was Director of Choirs and Department Head at his undergraduate alma mater, Hampton University, for 25 years. He is especially noted as an authority on the performance and preservation of music of African American traditions and composers. As a composer-arranger, he is perhaps best known for his festival setting of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and his spiritual settings, You Must Have That True Religion and In Bright Mansions Above. As past president of the National Association of Negro Musicians, Carter has a distinguished record of commitment and service, having held seats on the boards of directors of the League of American Orchestras, Sphinx, Tennessee Arts Commission, National Association of State Arts Agencies, the Chattanooga Symphony and Opera Association, Arts Build of Chattanooga, and Chorus America. He is founder and CEO of Marvel Incorporated, a music publisher specializing in the music of African-American composers and traditions, now published by Walton Music, and is founder and executive director of the Roland Carter Institute for Studies in American Music. Dr. Paul Kwame is musical director of the multi-award-winning Fisk Jubilee Singers. He was born in Ghana, West Africa, studied music at Ghana's National Academy of Music, and taught there until immigrating to the US in 1983 as a student at Fisk University. He promptly joined the Fisk Jubilee Singers and sang under the directorship of McCoy Ransom, a Fisk Jubilee Singer alumnus, who sang under John W. Work III's direction. During his years of service as musical director, the Fisk Jubilee Singers have received several awards, including the Rhapsody in Rhythm Award, the Americana Music Association Award, a Dove Award, and the Recording Academy Honors, as well as induction into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, the Music City Walk of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, and the American Classical Music Hall of Fame. The ensemble was awarded the 2008 National Medal of the Arts by President and Mrs. George W. Bush. Under his leadership, the Fisk Jubilee Singers won their first Grammy on March 14, 2021. Dr. David Morrow, a native of Rochester, New York, was valedictorian of his Morehouse College class, holds a Master of Music degree from the University of Michigan and a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. He conducts the renowned Morehouse College Glee Club to domestic and worldwide acclaim, most recently in Honduras and Algeria. His conducting honors include performances in such widely varying venues as Atlanta's Symphony Hall with soprano Jessie Norman, the national anthem of Super Bowl 28 with Natalie Cole, the opening and closing ceremonies of the 1996 Atlanta Centennial Olympic Games, on the Masterwork series for the Color of Music Festival in Charleston, South Carolina. We began this roundtable with a video of Dr. Carter conducting his arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing with the Winston-Salem State University Choir, alumni, and friends. Let us also view excerpts of the Fisk Jubilee Singers under the direction of Dr. Kwame, singing Wade in the Water, and the Morehouse Glee Club under the direction of Dr. Morrow, singing Betelehemu.
Children wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water. If you don't believe, I believe. God's gonna trouble the water. Well, just follow me down to Jordan Street. God's gonna trouble the water. Children wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to join us today. As a person who has long admired the work of all of you, it is an honor for me to co-moderate this panel today. I sit here as a graduate of Dillard University and a four-year member of the Dillard University Concert Choir under the leadership of Dr. S. Carver Davenport, a former student of yours at Hampton, Dr. Carter. From 1995 to 1999, I participated in exchange choral concerts between Dillard Concert Choir and Morehouse Glee Club under your direction, Dr. Morrow, every fall semester. Each spring, I participated in national tours with the concert choir, a direct reflection of the legacy of the Fisk Jubilee singers, now under your direction, Dr. Kwami. So I'm very excited to sit here with all of you today. Yesterday's pre-conference was focused on celebrating the musical legacy of HBCUs. As with most events at HBCUs, we began the day with a Lift Every Voice and Sing, and it should come as no surprise that we used a recording of your arrangement, Dr. Carter. Dr. Carter, would you talk with us about how you came to do that arrangement and the impact it ultimately has had?
Sorry. Good afternoon. I'm just honored to be here with my colleagues Morrow and Kwame, and with you.
Wait a minute. Yes.
I actually have contact. I have a relationship with each of you, and that is just so encouraging to me. Lift every voice and sing.
I saw him conducting.
Huh? I'm sorry. I missed something here. Okay. I am, the Lift Every Voice and Sing was a setting that is, I must admit, 50 years old now. And it started back in 1970. And at the end of the at the height of the Black Power movement, I guess. And what was going on in social justice activities during that time. And being a choir director, you know, we were ending our concerts with the Battle Hymn of Republic. You know, you always had to have that big piece at the end of the concert. So you did the patriotic thing. But it occurred to me that Lift Every Voice and Sing was an important piece of music or words and anthem that was called Black National Anthem, but should be shared with everyone. And this was before all the hymnal supplements to start putting it in. You know, United Methodist has Songs of Zion, the Catholics have Lead Me, Guide Me, and you know, the Episcopal have Lift Every Voice, and they all start using this song and putting it in there. So I was happy to be able to do that. And I must thank Jay Rosamond and James Weldon Johnson for their fabulous work in 1900, you know, for that. Also, I have to acknowledge Wilkowski too. You know, I can't turn him down because it somehow, I don't know how I came upon this. It was I mean, I know the arrangement, but the fact that the three verses so measured out with what Wilkowski had done with the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I didn't steal it, I just borrowed the model. You know, most, and many people did not know that at the time. I had to explain it to many people that I wasn't hiding that. But it was the opening of the Wilkowski, and also I knew the Ringwald edition also. So there were two big Battle Hymn things, but I just felt it fit the model. And that's where I got it in 1970. So I don't know how much you want me to talk about this, but the Lift Every Voice starts with the unison singing of the male voices, and then I got the ladies doing what Wilkowski did, Gloria, Gloria. I got them doing the counter melody, Lift Every Voice and Sing against the men part. And then you go into the second verse with the ostinato, Truth is Marching, Sing song, sing a song. I borrowed all of that, was marching and moving right on it with the chorale, God of our weary years, what was the third verse of the lift of the chorale that I can't even think of the words about him now.
In the beauty of the lilies.
In the beauty, thank you. Thank you. You're younger, so you can recall all of that. but the chorale worked. I mean, actually, I thought I knew Johnson's 7 sermons, the trombones, and I always considered that verse the 8th trombone of James Weldon Johnson. And as you know, Lowry read it and did it at the installation of Obama, and it really embraced it. It took on another life there. So that's what it's all about. And I'm so honored and delighted that the piece was able to take off and use that way. So thank you, all of you. It's been out there a while.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Dr. Hadley, you had a question for Dr. Morrow?
Yes, I'm just jumping in with a question. This is really going to be to both Dr. Kwame and Dr. Morrow. I'm thinking about the connections between HBCU music programs and Africa. A lot of times when people think about HBCUs, they don't think about Africa at all, which is unfortunate because there's a long relationship of students and faculty between both sides of the Atlantic and obviously the Caribbean diaspora as well. And so I'll pose both my questions at once and let you all return to the conversation. But Dr. Morrow, I'm thinking about, we heard and we saw excerpt of a performance, Hbcu, written by Babatunde Olatunji, who went to Morehouse as well. And so I wondered if you could talk about what that piece has meant as such a revered part of the repertoire of the Morehouse Glee Club, the layers of meaning that's come to have for both Glee Club members as well as for all of us who are fans of the Glee Club. And Dr. Kwame, I'm also thinking about when Fisk Jubilee singers, you were able to take them back to Ghana, or bring them with you to Ghana. And again, right. Sort of now we have all of this language about the year of return in Ghana and repatriation and all of those things. But what it meant for both the members of the Fisk Jubilee Singers and what it meant for you, a Ghanaian, to be able to kind of complete a circle in a way by bringing the Fisk Jubilee Singers to Ghana. So those are my questions to each of you, and I can't wait to hear your responses. Thank you.
I guess I should go first. Again, as Dr. Carter says, what a wonderful privilege it is to be on this panel with these esteemed colleagues in the choral music world. And so I'm very happy to participate. You mentioned Bethlehemu. Well, my predecessor, Dr. Wendell Whalum and Babatunde Olatunji were schoolmates. Dr. Whalum graduated from Morehouse in 1952 and Olatunji in 1954. So they became friends. Later, Olatunji shared Bethlehemu. I apologize, I have a motion sensor and I need to move. So sorry about that. I didn't mean to go dark on you. But the issue is that he shared this music. And it's not the only piece. It's the one that everybody ended up loving so much. And so the piece is in Yoruba, and the part of the translation is, "Where was Jesus born? Where was he born? In Bethlehem, the city of wonder." It's a Christmas piece. Well, Dr. Whalum did the arrangement for male chorus and kept it at Morehouse. He really actually didn't do much writing it out. He did it through the oral tradition. Each class had to teach the next class. He, of course, would tweak it and try to fix it and make it, keep changing it. Olatunji actually came back to Morehouse in 1983 or 84, and did a workshop and taught us even some more pieces. So the connection to this African music is extremely important. Let me back up a bit. So important that in 1972, And now we're dealing with the whole idea of celebrating that 50th year of when the Morehouse College Glee Club did a 5-country tour of Africa, sponsored by the State Department. In fact, the chair of our Division of Creative and Performing Arts, UZ Brown, was in the Glee Club that went there. And he's a world-renowned performer, composer himself. And so we went to Africa, and when we got there, we did this piece called Dide Tadeo, where we talk about returning home. And so that becomes important it just keeps growing and growing. We kept singing Betelehemu unpublished for decades. When we did the tribute to we were able to sing on the Kennedy Center Honors, where they honored Robert Shaw. And we sang Betelehemu. And I said, you know, this is the time to get it published. And so I wrote it out and published it in the TTBB version. And my schoolmate, Barrington Brooks, had done an SATB version that he had shared with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And so we got them published so that we could keep the tradition at home, even while people were still being able to sing it. Fast forward to coming up now, our colleague at Morehouse College, Dr. Aaron Carter Enyi, has helped us develop a composition competition for male chorus music, composers to compose male chorus music that will be premiered by the Morehouse College Glee Club. And we owe one composer a performance coming up soon, I hope. And so we're hopefully going to get back to Nigeria at some point soon, and maybe even celebrate this 50th anniversary. So it's just all of these threads come in here. Dr. Whalum recognized that when we talk about the oral tradition of African-American music, you have to pay homage to the oral tradition that it came from in Africa, in West Africa. And so all of that blends in together, and we don't have any part of our culture that is so separate. Everything sort of always intertwines, and that's how we kept it going. But Dr. Whalum even tried to do other pieces and tried to slip Betelehemu off of the program, and you should have seen the notes that came in intermission. You're certainly not going to do that. So that's sort of the way that has come about.
Well, yeah, first of all, I'd also like to thank all of you for this wonderful opportunity, because I believe it is so important for us to continue talking about African-American music. But I'm also very excited to see Dr. Roland Carter, who has been a source of inspiration to me for so many years, and of course, Dr. Morrow. We are all working together to make sure that people know our music, our culture. Now, talking about Ghana, it actually ties into a bit of my history here at Fisk University. Prior to coming to Fisk University, I had no knowledge of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. I was familiar with the name Jubilee Singers. And so when I got to Fisk, I did not even have any desire to audition to become a member of the ensemble. One student who was a music student said, "Paul, go in and try." So I did, just to please her. And then I became a member of the ensemble, which honestly changed my life. Because by becoming a member of the ensemble, I had the opportunity, first of all, to learn the history of Fisk Jubilee Singers. To my amazement, it was young African-American students who gave up their education and traveled around the world with the purpose of raising funds for the university. But as a result of that, they took music of their ancestors, music of their parents, transformed the music and shared it with the whole world, giving people like me the opportunity to know of the Negro spirituals before coming to Ghana. Then, of course, when I became musical director, it became one of my greatest desires to take the Negro spiritual in its polished form back to its roots, which is Ghana. Well, Ghana is one of the countries from where people were captured, and they came here with their music and created the Negro spirituals. When we received the invitation from the State of Department, I remember it was one early morning, it was a Saturday morning. Everyone in my house was asleep. I checked email, and then there was the invitation from the State of Department. And because people were asleep, and I knew that my dream of taking the Fisk Jubilee singers and their music back to its roots would come true, I was shouting within me because I knew that dream would come true. Eventually, we were able to get to Ghana, and my students originally were not very excited about going. People were afraid because those were days when people talked a lot about negative things happening in places like Ghana, but we managed to overcome those fears. Prior to going, one of my dreams also was that we would record these songs in the Almena Castle, one of the castles which served as the final home of our people. And that Sunday afternoon, when we walked into the courtyard of the Almena Castle, some of the students decided to take a tour of the castle, but they could not. They walked into the castle, into the dungeons, and within a few seconds came out crying because of that emotion that was developed by them going in to see the challenges that their ancestors had faced. But we ended up singing and recording on the courtyard of the Almena Castle. We prayed that singing these songs in that space would leave forgiveness and peace in the walls and on the grounds of the Almena Castle. At the end of our tour, which was very beneficial, we were so well received by Ghanaians. My students did not want to return because they developed a connection with a culture, and part of that culture is music. I continue to see music as one of the unifying elements between Africans and African Americans. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you, Dr. Kwame, and thank you, Dr. Morrow.
Such powerful responses. Thank you for that. There are many things that we could build on. I was listening to you talk about the music that you would do, that Wendell Whalum tried to move to something else, but everyone wanted to keep Betelehemu. They wanted to hear that every time they came. And I remember several years ago at Dillard, we had a 40-year anniversary for As Carver Davenport. And we closed every concert with Close to Thee and His Light Still Shines. And having all of those alum from so many decades all coming together, knowing that and being able to do that, it was a powerful experience. Can you speak to the repertoire that you do with your ensembles and traditions in there? What that means for your students, for your institutions, and for those who enjoy your performances? Anyone? Oh, Dr. Carter, you're muted. Let's see.
Okay, now I am. Well, I tell you, that's why I'm quitting, you know. It's a broad music, and I want to speak to that because our commitment to audiences and to students is not just entertainment. It's education and entertainment. And somehow I sense, of course I am not, I've been away from the HBCU for 25 years, but I think the important part I want to talk also about with what Ellis, and I'm going to sort of way get back to your question about broadness of repertoire, but I'm just so proud to have been educated in an HBCU with such a broad musical education. Now, please know, I was choir and band. When you left a school like Hampton or a HBCU, you could go in public school, you could do band, you could do choir, you could do orchestra, because you had all of those experiences like that. And that was the value. And what I insist on now is that we not just teach music for art's sake or music for music's sake. We teach music as a vehicle, as part of an education for life. And you employ and take all of those aspects. So our students get the music of the classics, the historic eras, they get the music of African Americans or Negro spirituals. As I love that term, Paul.
Yeah.
I love it. And we get also, and we brought even into a time when I went to school, you couldn't sing gospel music. But that, and as Ellis mentioned about the jazz thing, all of that was not part of it. But our education is so broad now. So the broadness of the repertoire is just so important. And I hope we never leave or lose that. I don't know if I addressed your question at all in that regard, Loneka.
Thank you.
So, for me at Morehouse, we have, and this is not by any stretch of the imagination of a point of bragging, but in the 111 years that the Morehouse College Glee Club has been in existence, there have only been 3 permanent directors. There have been 2 interim directors as well. So 5 people leading, with 3 permanent directors. And that's Kemper Harold, who taught Wendell Whalum, who taught me. And so it's very interesting when we look at Morehouse, because it's sort of a legacy that continues. And then trying to contemporize that legacy without it being temporary is always the interesting thing that we have to do. We certainly want to embrace the thing that has happened at an HBCU, being very honest about it, is that we've had to, over the years, depending on who was listening, we had to show not only that we can do what any PWI or any majority culture could do. We certainly had to do that. And so when we look at diversity in choral music, I always get a little bit tickled because we didn't have any choice but to be diverse. But then we also had to do African-American spirituals. That's too many words for me, so that's why I say Negro spirituals. That's just my personal. That's just, and that's all discussable. But the issue is we had to do Negro spirituals. We have to be able to show what the segue is from the spiritual to gospel. We talk about jazz, we talk about other kinds of music, and we've had to do all of it. But then again, just tipping the hat back to Roland Carter again, he saw at an HBCU African-American composers, which in now the buzz term is of non-indigenous, non-idiomatic. And I'm not poo-pooing that word at all. It's important to know, but non-idiomatic. When we add jazz to classical music, we don't say that. But when we put any African-American composer who does something that is not typically African-American, then it's considered non-idiomatic. But nonetheless, we slip it in there. I'm looking at all of my colleagues, and if you look at the chord structures, They can't help but put a little jazz in it. They'll put a little gospel chord in there in this wonderful classically conceived piece. We had to know those too. And the issue is that our students end up with this wealth of music that they are able to talk about, whether they're music majors or not. They can certainly go out and teach anywhere, but they can also talk about the music. Because one of the interesting things about choral music is that there is a text attached, and we have to portray that. And so we have all this stuff that we can call on and do, and we don't do it in every concert. Sometimes we try to do it in all concerts. We've got to, there's the formula, the Negro spiritual has to be last. I'm getting ready to change that in a concert that I'm gonna do. The Negro spirituals have to be last. The classical pieces have to be first. And then you do something in between, like it's some meat in a sandwich. But the issue is that we show all of this, and Africans came to America diverse. So we've been diverse all the time, and we just do it. And we've had to do it, and we've loved doing it, and we've loved the outcome from our students. So that's all I'll say about that at the point.
That's not all. Say it.
I was about to say, you're talking good. You're talking good.
Say it.
I would like to just say something about the title Negro Spirituals and then a few other things. There is no country in this world that can claim this song, this genre of music known as Negro Spirituals as its own. I know the British have their spirituals, but it is not what we have in America here. But the reason I like to use the word Negro spiritual is to give honor to our ancestors. And so I like to use that term. Now, getting back to music, African-American music is sometimes looked down upon by other people, and it's something that has been going on for years. For example, I know of people who don't care about gospel music, but we have to realize that our music defines who we are. We identify with our music. And if we allow other people to challenge us or even try to put down our form of music, if we cannot educate our young people to know the value of this music, which is part of their culture, then we would be on the losing side. When I was growing up in Ghana, just because of missionary activities, even my father, who was a musician, wouldn't allow me to mingle with people as they performed our cultural music. And that affected even our music education programs. We studied Western music instead of our own music. So we have the opportunity now to help our young people know music that belongs to them, and we should allow them to perform it. We should help them to see the values that are in these genres of music and give them the opportunity to perform them at all times.
Thank you. Wonderful gems being dropped here today. What you were talking about with programs and what is taught and what your students need, I believe connects with your, I'll call it legacy, if you will, or your connection to institutions. I noticed that all three of you taught at institutions where you were a student. Can you talk about that lineage, that being a part of that legacy? What does that mean for the programs, for the students? What does that, why is that important?
All right, I could go first. I studied under McCoy Ransom, who was a Fisk Jubilee singer under John Work III. And I remember in our rehearsals when I was a student, McCoy Ransom would talk about how John Work sometimes arranged his music, things that he did in his rehearsals how he led the ensemble. For example, John Work did not stand in front of the Fisk Jubilee singers to conduct. So McCoy Ransom taught us to sing without him conducting. And I have taken on that practice as well. It simply gives us the opportunity, first of all, to continue that legacy. But it also helps our students to be able to communicate with audiences as they sing. But the other thing is this music is tied to music making in African communities, where in a traditional setting, we do not have a conductor among Africans, but we have a song leader. People just get together and make music. So having studied under McCoy Ransom, who also studied with John Work III, has given me the opportunity to know of some of the traditions of the Fisk Jubilee singers, which I am passing down to current students.
Thank you.
Well, I've talked a little bit about my legacy anyway. It's very interesting. I looked in a book about, it was actually referring to the Renaissance period. It's almost like an apostolic succession where each one was a student of the previous one. In fact, the two interim directors of the Glee Club were also students of Wendell Whalum. And so we have this legacy coming into play. But I'm fortunate, I mean, we look at Kemper Harold, who was the first official director of the Morehouse College Glee Club, though preceded by two women who were forming music at Morehouse. He intended to come to Morehouse to firm up the orchestra and create a men's chorus or a glee club, and was planning to just stay a couple of years and move on. He stayed from 1911 until 1953. And then Wendell Whalum, his student, took over the Glee Club in 1953. And when he passed, he brought me on as assistant director. I'm very fortunate about that. In fact, the funniest story is I was not intending to come to Morehouse as a teacher that quickly. Everybody kept saying, you might be back someday. I was teaching at a high school in Rochester, New York, and teaching things that I don't know, like beginning guitar, junior high music theater, and stuff like that. But you have to stay, 3 chapters ahead in the book in order to stay on top of the class. And Dr. Whalum called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, at the time it had been a bad day, I said, I'm resting right now. He said, "No, fool, what are you doing?" And so, yes, so I told him what I was doing, and offered me an opportunity to be assistant director of the Glee Club. There is that legacy. He passed away in 1987, and I became director of the Glee Club. And so in all this time, we've had things passed down, as well as how you see some individuality in what each conductor can bring to the table. I was fortunate enough that Dr. Whalum was one of those who shared a lot. And so while he was Morehouse's, he was all of the choir directors' mentors in many ways. In fact, I would not know the other person on this panel, Roland Carter, if it were not for Wendell Whalum. And he made sure we knew each other. And now we're good buddies. I still hope we're still good buddies. I got to meet Rebecca Steele. I can't believe all these people that I got to meet through these folk, and you hear these legacies coming through all of these HBCUs. So it's very interesting how that happens.
I must comment. I thank you, David, and thank you, Paul, for your comments on. I'm interested in this legacy lineage thing that happens at HBCUs. And I have to go all the way back to my high school, which was an all-Black high school. So, it began before the HBCU, I tell you, right. Because it was Atlanta that I had close contact. Gaddis Hubert Johnson, wow, Jay DeCoven, Killingsworth, John Work in Nashville. I knew all of these people. I cannot believe that here I am as a pioneering HBCU, but professor, but I just love the influence that they've had on me. Hampton's rich tradition with Robert Nathaniel Dett, I cannot deny.
Right.
That was a cloud over my head for many years, but a good one. That's all right. But my mentor, Charles Flax, was a favorite student of Nathaniel Dett. So that just made me whatever I am and whoever I am, I owe to those guys. And being able to pass that lineage along, I mean, to have these fine students that were part of my choirs, like Royce L. Dillard, you got Marcus Garrett out there, you got Jason Dungy out there, you got, I'm just so happy about, they make me look good. They give me most of my friends, Paul and David, and even you, Loneka, give me far too much credit. I'm just happy to have had all of you in my life. So thank you much. But that lineage is important.
Yeah.
That lineage for you as within your programs, but also out, I think, as you were talking about into other HBCUs, there's so many people that are beneficiaries of that legacy that you have and that you shared. I, for one, am one, as Carver Davenport. And one of those aspects of the HBCU choral programs that goes back to Fisk early on is that touring ensemble aspect of choral performance, of choral programs. Can you talk about the role touring has played in your programs? Has it been at all affected by the pandemic? And what was the nature of it before then, if it has been?
I'll jump out there first, I think, because the whole idea of touring has changed significantly since I was at Hampton. It was indeed a public relations vehicle. The choir was much a part of public relations department as any other work that was being done. But that sort of changed with the expense of housing and traveling, and presidents start thinking about making money rather than raising money and raising awareness. And there's just, you cannot put value on the awareness that these organizations raised, traveling, and even before we were able to do hotels, but staying in homes to enlighten people about Hampton, blacks, whites, rich, whatever, whoever. I mean, that enlightenment issue is so important. And I hope presidents won't get away from that or will bring that back, and the value of traveling and what the choirs do. And the education part of that we enlighten, and culture, spreading our culture and enlightening audiences all over the world.
Wonderful.
I thought that is so funny that you said about staying in homes, because that's definitely there. And one of the interesting things about that, I think that there has been some change. I agree with you on that. But, you know, I don't think we can get away from the legacy of the fact that these ensembles, I mean, similar to what Dr. Ellis said about the band, it's a public relations issue. It's public relations and publicity. Now, when I tell my students about Professor Kwame, about the Fisk Jubilee singers in 1871 going on a world tour and raising money for the college, they look at me and say, the more things change. I said, well, you don't know all of the details, but we look at that. The first point is, in the touring, we've got to present a good product. We just can't go out there and just go and holler at somebody and hope that's okay. So all of the things that are good about the college come out in these ensembles that go out and perform. And so this is very interesting. And so, we have to keep doing that, and we're still trying to do that. All right, this pandemic, doggone it. We got in the middle of the tour. In fact, I have to somehow finish the other half of the tour. We were in the middle of the tour, got the call. Boy, that was a long ride back to Atlanta in March of 2020. But I'm thankful to God, I brought back a healthy bus of guys back. So, but yes, it is a challenge. These wonderful Zoom things are wonderful tools for us to get together like this, and just so tough when it comes to the arts and trying to create art and make art. And so all of this ends up being a challenge for sure. But guess what? We persevere anyway. I think many choir directors have gone into their producer hat, which they never knew they had. Then have to go into the technology and figure out the electronics of electric usages of technology and all of this. So all of this still happens. And so we tour. I think somebody is even talking about trying to figure out how to electronically tour, take a concert and tour it rather than tour the actual ensemble. There are all kinds of ways that people are coming up with it. I think, though, going back to the homes, this interesting thing about our students having to present themselves in a choir, but they don't get off work if they have to stay at home, because they end up having to represent the college wherever they are. And sometimes when you go in these homes, you've sung a beautiful concert and you're hoping to just go and get into bed and go to sleep or eat quickly. But then you've got to stay up and talk about the college and the choir to all of your hosts and answer their questions. I'm not complaining. It's just a thing that has to happen. And so you're always on, and we present that way. And that's a wonderful way that, as Roland Carter said, the culture is established. And yes, as was said in the chat, ambassadors.
Yeah, whether the administrations like it or not, our choral groups and of course other performing ensembles become the visible parts of the university. Whether we are raising a lot of money or not, whenever we go out to perform, to provide quality music to various audiences, some of whom may never have heard of us or have known us, we always represent our universities, and in some cases also indirectly serve as recruiters for our institutions. And I can also say that touring is another form of education for our students who actually go on tour. For example, I've had students who may never have traveled outside their states, but because they become members of the ensemble, it gives them an opportunity to travel and meet people. Well, of course, when the pandemic hit, all of that had to cease. People who wanted us to perform had to send camera crews to our campus, and then we would record songs for them and send them out. That did work during that time, but I personally believe in that in-person performance because there's something magical about watching a group of singers on stage expressing their emotion through songs that they have learned with an audience who receives the message and reacts beautifully. So the touring has to go on, whether people want to electronically do it or not. I still believe that just a live performance does something magical to audiences all over.
I would like to, if I may follow up on another aspect of this, indeed, I'm looking, I've got to recognize some names here. Rebecca Steele, Carl Smith, there Carver Davenport. there are legacies out there, been out there for, I guess Kwame been there 50 years, you know. So, you know, that's just so, that's getting back to that legacy and important part of that. The other thing I see, people are concerned when we were talking about repertoire. I think there was some issue about hip hop and rap and all of that, but we've been doing that all the time. I mean, the Harlem Boys Choir started, you know, we used that as a model for so many HBCU choirs because of what they were able to do in that and encourage us to do things. So the repertoire is quite, hip hop is not out of our realm. You know, it is not out. And so please be aware, we're doing some of everything now. And that is what the beauty of all of this. We can do a program from beginning in and embrace practically every style of music in the world. Right.
Thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, for your responses. Please continue to drop your questions into the chat. We have about 8 more minutes before we go into some more discussion with the questions. But I do want to talk about the makeup of your ensembles. I'm sure that you have students in your ensembles who are not music majors, who may not go on to careers in music, yet through the experiences that you've been talking about, they are still learning and gaining things that they will be able to take out and use with them for the rest of their lives. Can you talk about that? You mentioned the experience of being an ambassador, having to go out and interact with people, even when you might be tired after a concert. Can you speak to some of the things your students are gaining in your ensembles that they will be using for the rest of their lives?
Well, I'll dare jump out there again very quickly. I think there's an important part that the non-music major plays in this process. Actually, many of them go out and become teachers and directors of community groups. You know, so they do. I mean, that's how well they are trained and prepared for keeping our music alive. David, I'll be quiet.
No, not at all, sir. But it's very interesting because I've always been asked, so are all of your guys music majors? No, in fact, oh goodness. In fact, the fewest number of majors is music. They all come from all over the disciplines of the school, but they gravitate toward this art that is the choral art. And the interesting thing about choral singing is that your instrument is in your body, so you bring it all the time. You don't have to find a piano to practice. You don't have to put together an instrument to practice. Your instrument is there all the time. And so everybody thinks they can do it. I have more people perhaps that don't read music than do. I've told some people, I said, we have some folk who wouldn't know a half note from a chicken that walked by. But the issue is they still learn how to do it. Here's the interesting thing. They begin to, in these ensembles, and I don't care whether it's a choral ensemble or an instrumental ensemble, there is the whole idea of corporate music making that creates a community. And that becomes something that goes out even further than the music. I look at my music majors who will grab a guy and say, come here, you need to know this one right here is a quarter note, it's black 10, and it's got this line on it. Here's the one, and they just go, because they want to do it. They'll have somebody who'll gravitate toward it. We'll have some science majors who want to know, what do you mean by you hear the overtones? What does that mean? I'm a scientist, tell me about that. They start talking about they talk about, well, how does that fit in sociologically with so and so and so, talking about the spiritual and a text. And I'll start talking about that. And then the sociology majors chime in and wait a minute, this is what happened. And they'll have a little debate about this. All of this becomes part of the education that happens in this corporate model of music making. And so we have all kinds of students. I mean, really, one guy, he admitted his only singing prior to singing in the Morehouse College Glee Club was in the shower. And you know, the shower makes everybody sound wonderful. And so, and so then we get to a dry room that doesn't have the resonance. And he said, oh, I said, well, no, it's not bad. It's just different. Let's work on it. Let's work on it. And then you're supposed to educate. And sometimes in our choir performance schedules, there's not that time to just actually teach rudiments of music so that everybody can read. And there is value in the rote teaching because it helps the ear. And so all of that becomes part of it. I'll never forget sitting on the bus. We're on our way to a performance. Dr. Whalum had a call at the hotel, no cell phones at that point, a call from the hotel saying, we're expecting you to sing so-and-so. We hadn't learned it. The bus ride was the learning. And he had to say, okay, y'all sing this and sing it in the mic on the bus. All of that happens in terms of how these students, and we just learn it. Okay, now I don't like that part. You sing this instead. Oh no, that's the wrong note, it's the wrong chord, but you don't know what I'm talking about, but just sing this note. So all of that becomes so important, and they are so empowered when they help each other and they present this product. So yeah, we have all kinds of students, and it's such an enriching thing, especially if it's at a small liberal arts school like Morehouse is.
Yes, the same applies to Fisk University. Our students take pride in Fisk Jubilee singers as well as other musical ensembles. And so some of my students, since I have been directing, were never music majors. But I've always believed that it's fair to open auditions to any Fisk student who desires to become a member of the ensemble. And they, of course, audition. And when selected, this also becomes a wonderful learning experience for them, because I've had students who never read music, but wanted to learn to sing. It also gives me the opportunity to teach them about the Negro spiritual and its culture, about the text, as has been mentioned, because knowing the text and helping our students to, I use the word, be married to the music, brings a big change into their social and spiritual lives. But we do encourage anyone who wants to audition to participate in the audition process.
You sort of started speaking to another question I had, and I think at this point we can have Dr. Hadley and Dr. Ellis join us again. Let's see. The role of oral traditions in your ensembles. And I was listening to you earlier, Dr. Morrow, talking about Betelehemu and how it was not written for a period of time. And I'm wondering if the songs that are transmitted orally, how do they change? Do they morph? What's added? What happens to them over time? What role does that play in your programs?
Well, here's the interesting thing about the oral tradition. If it's done well, it doesn't necessarily change or morph, because people are so clear about the oral tradition and wanting to be, and they're so dedicated to preserving that tradition and preserving what it is, that they pass it on carefully. There is, so that, in fact, you saw Betelehemu, a little excerpt of that. The Morehouse College Glee Club does not use a score to this day. The score, I bought the score because I want people to buy music and so that people can make money. But the issue is that score is intact in a box in our library. I make them teach each other. What does morph is how they interact and how they dedicate themselves to that oral tradition. And so, but what they're exact to know that's not quite the way it goes. Okay, you can add that little bit, but don't go too far because they want the tradition to be recognizable.
Excellent insight. Thank you.
You know, one beautiful thing about the oral tradition and our music is it helps us to keep the authenticity of our music. And the simplicity of our music also makes this oral tradition very easy, but it's really one of the traditions that we have to keep. I went into a rehearsal last week and wanted to teach a song and did not have copies. I just asked my returning singers, you know this part, you remember, teach, and we did it. Sometimes that is even better than having a score and learning from the score.
Sometimes it's faster.
It is.
And I may add, often it makes the music a bit more real, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And meaningful. Sometimes music on the page stays on the page. And although you learn the notes, you never make music. So anyway, probably doesn't make sense, but
Well, it absolutely does make sense. In fact, I learned from a Polish conductor, and I've used the term all the time. I tell my students all the time, can I have my music? I said, you don't have music until you make it. That's a score.
It's important. Yes.
You make the music. All you have is a roadmap.
Right.
And if you stare at that roadmap, I tell them about reading music and looking at the score. I said, if you have to read a score to perform it, it'll be just like reading a map to drive. You're going to have a wreck.
Right. Yeah.
I love it. That's fabulous.
Pardon me as I take notes. You don't have music until you make it. Yes, I love that.
Yes, yes.
Dr. Ellis, did you have any thoughts on oral transmission in your music programs?
Well, I have to be honest, the only oral transmission is me. But I do have some thoughts on the scores. I still use the scores. However, we learn that music and we learn it from memory. At a concert, we are playing what we probably rehearsed months and months and months, and we interpret what we learned. Lose the dependence that we try to get them not to depend, like the other gentleman said, on the score, reading the score. We're interpreting what we think the composer intended for the audience. So orally, we do sing. We warm up in scales, diatonic scales, and we sing the scales. And the philosophy is if you can't sing the note, or you can't hear the note, you can't sing the note. So we do that in band as well.
Very good.
Dr. Ellis, do you have any, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be, I'm butting in with a question. What about with the, with jazz improvisations?
Okay. Jazz improvisation, what we basically do is just what I do. I haven't seen it in the books, but we do with nursery rhymes and play through nursery rhymes in as many keys as we possibly can play. And then we try to transpose that up into the actual score when we're playing. That's how we do it. Takes a long time, but because we very rarely get kids coming in that can improvise, unless those students coming from a performing arts school. And I found out yesterday that we've got a young man from Ohio that can do it. But for those students who we can't, we Jingle Bells, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Jesus Loves Me, and just play it in all the keys.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. We have a question for you in the chat. And that question is, will you describe how Dr. Foster transformed the sound and visual aesthetic of military marching band tradition into a distinctive HBCU style that became the model for other marching bands?
Well, Dr. Foster is I'm not going to say he's the only one, but in terms of familiarity with me, Dr. Foster wrote a book called Band Pageantry. And that was the Bible for a long time and still is, not only HBCU, but PWIs as well, in terms of the book that Dr. Foster wrote. So with that book, I know when I read it, I used, in terms of thematic, his suggestion for making shows based around a theme, something that the community, whoever the audience, could log on to, if you will. And I still use that because I see a lot of younger directors just going out without planning what they're going to perform. We're just going to go out and jigaboo for 15 minutes without giving the proper thinking. So that's one of the things, to answer your question, that the book that Dr. Foster wrote on band pageantry and influenced the way, not only, you don't have to be a graduate of Florida A&M, but he influenced everybody, no matter what school you went to. So I don't know if that answers the young lady's question, or young man, but that's what I got from Dr. Foster.
Yes, and that question was from Dr. Maltsby. What about the fast, high-stepping style and the dance component?
Okay, we're kind of stepping in a little mud here. And I am one of the ones who, we do dance, but I'm one of the ones who I kind of think that, is it necessary? Do we have to dance to get an applause? And how many different dance steps are there? So once you've seen one band, basically you've seen the other one do the dance step. Although again, if one of my students said, we are going to dance, but I try to depend less on a dance routine than most, I think. So, you know, if you go to an average, not average, but if you go to an HBCU marching band performance, you got the off the line, you've got the downfield drill, then you play a ballad, the girls dance. And why is it that you have to dance at the end to get applause? I think all parts of your performance should garner applause and excitement from those people.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis.
I ain't got that yet, but still just.
Yeah, I'm looking through my notes for today, and one of the things that was stated was Africans came to America diverse. Now we have a lot of conversations in various institutions about diversity and inclusion. Do those types of conversations happen throughout your programs? And if so, how do those conversations take place?
Well, I can say this. With my program, in order to draw the outside public into our performances, we do have performances where we collaborate with guest artists who sing different types of music. In a few weeks, for example, we will have a concert that includes blues, jazz, gospel, country, hip hop, rock and roll. And this is all to help people understand that, first of all, African American music is extremely important to our social life. But even more importantly, we're able to show the world that we have the ability to perform these types of music. But in doing so, it helps us to build relationships with people of other cultures. So that's one of the important goals for which we perform a variety of other kinds of music.
I think our tradition of having to have done all this music makes a lot of times HBCU performing artists in choral, especially in choral music, it makes it easier for us to deal with a diverse subject. I was on another panel like this, and I said that diversity starts with respecting the culture. And as was said by my colleagues, yes, we had to do Handel, Beethoven, and we had to learn that culture and respect that culture. The Morehouse College Glee Club went to Russia, and our first concert was at Moscow Conservatory. And I refused to be the one who would not do anything. They were telling us, just do what you all do. I said, no, we're going to do a piece, a Russian piece. And Dr. Whalum had done this wonderful setting from the Rachmaninoff Vespers of Bogorodice Dievo. Oh my goodness, if you could only imagine how nervous I was to perform that piece there. Yet, it was important to do so. And it was important for me to get the language right. And it was important for me to get the style right. Luckily, there are some interesting parallels between African-American sound of music and Russian music. And to just hear the one little lone bravo when we got done, let me know that I had respected the culture. And if anybody can just remember that, you don't have to know everything and you can't include everybody all the time. But if we could just do that, that conversation about diversity in music ends up being a little bit easier to handle if you start from that standpoint, at least in my opinion.
Thank you. Dr. Hadley?
Unfortunately, I could listen to y'all all day. The spirit of the rich musical legacies of HBCUs have just been flourishing in the comments and the reflections that you all have shared today. And so can everyone please join us in thanking our panelists, Dr. Ellis, Dr. Kwame, Dr. Carter, and Dr. Morrow for this really rich conversation. At this point, I'd also like to remind you all that this was recorded. This was recorded, and the recording will be placed at the AUC Robert W. Woodruff Library and accessible to all. I'd also like to make a note that on Saturday, keeping up with the theme of HBCU research and content, Saturday there is a panel at 10:45 called Black Marching Band Tradition, and excellent papers on that panel. So if you would like to continue this conversation, please make sure that you check out that panel. We will be, we dropped some links in the chat to some performances that were referenced, some recordings that were referenced, the band pageantry book as well. But again, we cannot thank you all enough for making this roundtable so rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.